Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. I'm Reuven ben Shalom, sitting in for Jonathan Hessen. When Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi planned his visit to Beirut last month, his focus was to have been on the continued Iranian support for Hezbollah at a time when the Shiite organization is under pressure by Israel, the United States, and to some extent by the local government headed by a Maronite President and a Sunni Prime Minister. But by the time Araghchi managed to set foot in Lebanon, the tables were turned. Now it is the Khamenei regime which is in need for help from wherever quarter it can beg for it. And Hezbollah is certainly indebted to Tehran for 4 decades of military and financial buildup. How will the Iranian-Lebanese relationship play out? With us to discuss it are Mr. Hussein Abdul Hussein, Research Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy in Washington, D.C., and former senior writer and editor in Beirut and throughout the Middle East. Welcome. Mr. Oded Eilam, a former senior Mossad officer with deep knowledge of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations with ties to Iran. Welcome. And TV7's editor-at-large, Amir Oren. Amir, set the stage for this debate.
You know, Reuven, it's a very interesting issue in a more general sense. There was this, of course, phrase from the scriptures, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall fear no evil. But once you are on the ground as a regime under attack, either domestically or from foreign forces, how soon can and will other forces come to your rescue? First of all, they look around to see where they are going to survive. We have the Assad regime experience. In 8 days or so, it was gone. We saw that the 12-day war in June brought no help to Iran during the conflict. Later, it was helped in recovering to a partial extent. We saw Venezuela. There are other examples. So the Khamenei regime and the government, which is not identical with the regime but is subordinate to it, they are desperately looking for help. And one logical avenue is to go to the proxies, and among the proxies is Hezbollah. But Hezbollah itself doesn't know whether Israel is looking for just this excuse or just this opportunity in order to strike it. So right now, 3 weeks into the mass protests, we have not seen Hezbollah coming in force the way the pro-Iranian Iraqi militias are supposed to. And maybe it's a work in progress.
Let's not forget that Hezbollah actually joined the fight in Syria. They poured into Syria to support the Assad regime.
But Syria has a common border with Lebanon.
Absolutely.
In order to go to Iran.
Yes. And to start to unpack this, Hussein, I'd like to hear from you. You know something about the region. We use the term proxy, making it sound as if they're a puppet. But as Amir just said, it's not that simple. How do you see the relationship between Tehran and Hezbollah?
Until very recently, we used to think that Nasrallah takes orders from Iran. But since Israel took Nasrallah out, now we're coming to revise our understanding to think that Nasrallah was not really someone who was being bossed. He was high in the chain of command of Iran itself, that he was one of the pillars of the regime. And you can notice that after the killing of Soleimani, the most decisive loss for the Iranian regime and its axis in the region was the killing of Nasrallah. Hezbollah has not recovered since then, and the axis has not recovered. Assad eventually collapsed. Now Iran itself is facing trouble. So Hezbollah has been hit severely. It's been trying to rebound and reconstitute itself. But I'm not sure to what extent they can do that. You know, all the card of decks seems to be stacked against their coming back. Even though we know that they're trying. We know that they're rebuilding, they're reorganizing. Another point that I'd like to highlight here is the role of the Lebanese state and the Lebanese government. I think we'd all love to see them play the role of a partner with the world in suppressing Hezbollah because this is clearly their interest. No government renounces its sovereignty out of its sheer will. Lebanon has lost its sovereignty only because the world handed the country over to Assad in the 1990s, and then after that, Hezbollah took over after Assad was ejected. But you would think that the Lebanese state has an interest in restoring its sovereignty, and it's bad that the Lebanese state is not doing enough to do that. I think the Lebanese seem to fear the inconsistency in the foreign policy, especially between America and Iran. And this keeps them hiding. They think if there's ever a deal between America and Iran, and which is ironically enough, the last statement by Washington saying that we will talk to Iran came out yesterday or the day before. We said we're willing to talk to the Iranians over their nuclear weapons or nuclear program. So the Lebanese are still hiding. They still fear that there might be a compromise, some sort of a settlement between the US and Iran. And as long as this is the case, they're not playing the role of being a partner in suppressing Hezbollah, which means that until this minute, the suppression of Hezbollah is a job that Israel is handling on its own.
And Oded, speaking of Israel, how do we see the strength of Hezbollah, the successes of our campaign, our previous campaign, and how all of this issue could play out?
I would like to highlight a certain angle, which I think most of commentators don't really deal with. And this is the angle of the financial status of the Hezbollah. Any sort of terror organization cannot thrive and cannot live without any financial background and any financial support. The main supporter of the Hezbollah was Iran and also the Coptagon drug dealing, which Hezbollah was one of the world's biggest drug dealers together with the Assad regime, as well as some sort of legitimate halawa, what we call a source of money. The major problem right now for the Hezbollah in reconstruction and rebuilding, and even in stabilizing themselves within the Shiite community, is the desperate need for money. And this thing, it doesn't matter what's going to be the outcome of this rebellion in Iran, whether the regime perhaps will be able to suppress it or by force or by any other means or not. There is one thing for sure is going to happen. What we have seen before will not be copy-paste right now again, because simply for the fact that whatever comes out of these dramatic events in Iran, the Iranian later and the day after will be focused more on internal issues. They will focus more on trying to somehow get out of this mess that they are in. And I'm saying that on the bad scenario, if they fail to, if the regime stays intact. So in any case, it's a lose-lose situation for the Hezbollah regarding its possibility to recover from what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let me emphasize the last lesson that Oded Elam has taught us, and that is the financial aspect of how the crisis can be solved. If the regime manages to get some sort of compromise with the United States, sanctions will be lifted and the economy can recover. This is obvious. This is the prize dangled between or in front of their eyes. But let me also point the irony. 40 years or so ago, more than that, 43, 44, the newly instituted Islamic regime in Tehran came to the Shiites in Lebanon and started helping them and helping itself by building Amal and later Hezbollah, because the Shiites were the poorest of the poor. They were the downtrodden of the earth. And now the Iranians are in this position of being so poor that they are in need of help. So apparently the planet is indeed round and goes around.
Mm-hmm. Hussein, could you take us to the narrative of the people? Lebanon is a fascinating, diverse place with a very interesting history as far as the clash between all the various sects. And I'm curious what you can tell us about what the people feel. And I saw when I said the people, it depends if you're a Christian in a southern village or if you live in Beirut. But can you give us some feel of what the people feel and want, even especially as far as Israeli intervention towards Hezbollah?
Well, this is an interesting question. Let me just start by saying that among the Shia, who are the base of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has been fighting Israel for this long, even among the Shia, to them, their support of Hezbollah is not because of Israel or Iran or any global issue. The support of Hezbollah that comes from the Shia is not related to Iran or Israel. It is related to the Shia measuring their power vis-a-vis the Maronites and the Sunnis and the Druze of Lebanon. And the reason they don't want to give up arms is that they feel that they will become weaker vis-a-vis the other parties. But when it comes to the Shia or Lebanon versus Israel, the Shia are not really that ideological. And that's why you see that after the 2006 war, the first thing that Nasrallah did to absorb all this anger among the Shia against the war and against Hezbollah itself was that he sent them to protest the government of Fuad Sanyura in downtown Beirut. And, they set up a tent city for a month and they stopped the government and whatnot. So one way how Hezbollah keeps these Shia behind him is that he scares them that if Hezbollah weakens, that the other guys will take over and they'll send us back to being the shoe shiners and the downtrodden and all these impoverished images about the Shia that we have. So this in this aspect, and let me add here another thing about the Shia, not only of Lebanon, but also the Shia of Iraq and Shia of the world. Jerusalem is not holy to the Shia at all. It's not even important to them. The Dome of the Rock was built by an Umayyad caliph, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, and the Shia hate the Umayyads because they killed Imam Hussein, the third Imam. So to the Shia, you have Mecca, you have Medina, and then you have Najaf, and then you have Karbala. Najaf where Imam Ali is buried, Karbala where Imam Hussein is buried. So to bring Palestine, and by the way, every Palestinian is Sunni. There are no Shia Palestinians, and that's another layer that you can tell that this whole narrative that the Khomeini shoved down the throats of the Shia was not really their thing. They played along because there was, number one, there was financial interest. They got a lot of money out of it. Number two, they became domestically very strong when measured against the domestic rivals. And number three, you don't fight Israel really every day. It's like, once every 10 years. Let me just conclude by saying that in 2022, when Hezbollah was at its peak in Lebanon, 17% of the Shia who went to the ballot boxes in the parliamentary election, elected against Hezbollah and its ally Amal, of Speaker Nabi Berri. So you had 17% of the Shia against Hezbollah. This was 2022. Now imagine now when many of the Shia have yet to return to their homes and their destroyed villages in the south. I imagine that the percentage is much bigger. And this is the Shia that are supposed to be Hezbollah's base. If you look at the Sunnis, they're angry at the Shia as it is for killing Hariri, for participating in the Syrian war. If you look at the Christians, they're also angry at Hezbollah for doing what it's been doing. So outside of the Shia world, I don't think Hezbollah enjoys much support other than, the people on Hezbollah's payrolls across Lebanon.
Very interesting. Oded, from the perspective of the IDF, we have a forward deployed force inside of Lebanon. It looks like maybe the philosophy coming out of the October 7th war, where we have forward deployed forces on all fronts, including in Lebanon. And in recent days, there have been quite significant airstrikes on the Hezbollah targets. What do you think the objective of the IDF now is, of course, besides degrading Hezbollah capabilities? How does this play into the strategy of Israel and what we intend to push forward in Lebanon?
First of all, we have to remember that whatever IDF strategy is, we have a partner, which is Trump. And I mean, we cannot operate anything independently without taking into consideration Trump and Tom Barak and all the envoys that are right now are trying to extract some sort of an action out of the our own regime. But after having said that, Israel's strategy is, of course, not allowing any sort of rebuilding and reconstructing of Hezbollah almost on a daily basis. I mean, one outcome of the change of the concept after the 7th of October was we don't really care anymore what are the intentions are. We deal directly with the threat before it become an imminent threat. And this is more or less what we are doing right now in Lebanon. We have been doing that in Syria. In some extent, we are right now, of course, doing it in Gaza. So the Israeli strategy, as I can foresee it right now, is not going to have a total invasion, let's say, into the southern part of Lebanon or occupying some of the villages and so on, but intensify the strike even more than we have seen until now in order to convey a message to the Lebanese government. Listen, you have to start pulling your sleeves and taking care of it, because otherwise we are not going to let down or we're not going to abrupt anything, and we are going to continue with what we are doing now. Doesn't mean that it means a total invasion or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Amir, going back to the Iranian-Hezbollah connection, do you see a scenario now where Iran is under pressure so much that they somehow are able to reignite the Lebanese front using Hezbollah?
They may, but this would be very short-sighted, because after the first move, there will be a counter move, and the counter move could be not only against Hezbollah in Lebanon, but against Iran itself. And conversely, the major security challenge for Israel has been the multi-front war. If you take Lebanon or Hezbollah out of it, if you effectively take Hamas out of it, the Houthis may or may not take part if they are on their own. They join the fight, according to their propaganda, to help their Palestinian brethren. But if there is ceasefire in Gaza, they have no business doing it. So Iran, looking at the so-called ring of fire which Soleimani tried to create, knows that it is no longer operative. And therefore, probably cooler heads will prevail, because the Iranian leadership has been quite rational, according to their rationale, and they will probably not try to hasten their own demise.
Mm-hmm. Hussein, I want to ask you, the outcome of the previous war was a understanding maybe that Israel was able to dismantle Iran's grand strategy of this ring of fire, that maybe in a way there is no axis of resistance, what once we called the axis of evil. Is that true? Or actually is the Iranian strategy of maintaining its proxies still going to be with us in the next decade?
Well, it depends to what extent the Iranian regime will be with us for the next decade. The fact that Israel could manage to crush these proxies and strike inside of Iran itself does not mean that the axis did not exist. It existed, and Israel just managed to beat it. But we all know that Iran doesn't want to go. Iran wants to stay. like I said, we all know that Hezbollah is trying to rebuild its capabilities in Lebanon. We know that in Iraq, and Oded talked about this, the finance, all the funding that comes to Lebanon from Iran. But to my mind, the biggest chunk of money currently comes from Iraq. The Hashd al-Shabi, the pro-Iran militia in Iraq, they receive money from the government, $3.3 billion from government money, that the money that they get out of selling oil, their oil revenue. $3.3 billion go to Al-Hashd al-Shabi, and Hashd al-Shabi uses this money as a slush fund to finance all its operations around the world, whether in Lebanon, whether in Yemen. In the past, they used to fund Syria too. So this money still comes from Iraq as we speak now, with whatever happens to Iran. And this money helps keep Hezbollah afloat and going. You opened the show by talking about Adnan Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, visiting Beirut. And what I heard from Lebanese sources is that on his private jet, he had 4 big suitcases filled with hundreds of dollars. This is money that he had either gotten to finance and fund Hezbollah or to stack away, thinking that the regime might fall. Because we hear that he brought his family with him on the flight, and they stayed in Beirut. They never went back to Iran. So whether these guys are hedging and sending money out and stacking it out, or he was coming to fund Hezbollah, is anybody's guess. But the money's still flowing, and that's a problem, and that needs measures that are more than Israel and more than Lebanon can do. Mainly by convincing the Iraqis to switch from cash economy to a regular economy.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds from both of you, except you, Amir, that money is the issue. Money is the main issue.
I'm all for it.
You're on board too.
Yes.
And I think also 20 and 30 years ago, when we discussed counter-terror operations, we used to say, follow the money. And Hezbollah since then turned into a big conglomerate, even with world-sweeping abilities. Oded, I want to ask you, how do we perceive Hezbollah's internal understanding of what happened to them during this campaign? We all know the beeper operation or the pager operation and the radios that blew up. There was a feeling here that we brought them to their knees. What do you think they perceive as the outcome of that war? And does that influence at all what happens in the future?
First of all, we have to see who's left to perceive, because most of their top echelons were actually wiped out during the campaign. And so we are right now seeing some change of generation within the Hezbollah, mainly led by Wafik Safar, who was a very, very tough extremist from the old guards. But definitely we see a complete change in the leadership inside the Hezbollah. I think they are very realistic, understanding, first of all, they were penetrated mainly by the Mossad. Not just on the technological side, but also on the human side. They understand exactly their limitations. They absorb a tremendous blow to their reputation. Exactly as Hussein said, it's more within Lebanon rather than outside Lebanon, and this is what actually scares them and frightens them, the fact that they are no longer perceived as the dominant member of the community of Lebanon, but I would say very beaten and in a very shallow point. So right now, I think that the possibility of the Hezbollah of initiating any sort of a grand campaign against Israel, even on behalf of the Iranian, is quite limited, because of the fact that they know exactly their status within Lebanon and on the international level, and of course the balance of power with Israel.
We have all been using the metaphor of the octopus. And I am not an expert on octopuses or octopusi or whatever it is. But the real question is, can an octopus survive when the tentacles are being severed. Now, apparently, if you take a crash course on the octopus, it turns out that the tentacles are even more brainy than the brain, than the head of the octopus. Sometimes they can think and act independently. So I wonder, who is more vulnerable right now, the Iranian regime or Hezbollah?
Mm-hmm. There's approximately a minute left, so Hussein, if you may, I would like to think, if you think there's a bad scenario where Hezbollah takes over Lebanon, where actually from this down point where they're at, and we talked about the money issues, etc., and from manipulating the Lebanese people, etc., that there is a point where they actually assume control and we end up worse than we began.
They have a blueprint for this. Assad used this all the time. The Iranian regime uses it. And it is to hunker down and wait until things change, whether inside of Israel politically or globally, whether a democratic president replaces President Trump, they will hunker down and wait. This is the plan that they have. Meanwhile, they are building up slowly, but they understand that they're not coming back instantly as they wish to. And you can see that in their statements that they put out all the time.
Interesting. Well, I learned a lot from this discussion. And for me personally, the outcome of this is that we need to be humble.
Not necessarily a Democratic president, even J.D. Vance, who is more isolationist.
I agree. But we have to be humble with the understanding of the limits of our power, even humble with our deep cultural understanding, like Hussein enlightened us about what's happening inside of Lebanon. And I would like to say thank you, Hussein, and thank Amir and Oded. And I would also like to thank our viewers. Until the next edition, Shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.